Welcome to the Ignite Movements podcast, where we're equipping leaders to think beyond a one ministry mindset to a multiplication mindset. Over the course of the podcast, we've looked at how to structure your leadership. We've talked about how to lay a disciple-making foundation, how to put together engaging messages, how to crock-pot your church plant. We've talked about the importance of children's and student ministries, how to go multi-site. We talked about all those different issues, and obviously all of those are extremely important. But more important than all of those issues are the people that you're walking on this journey with, and that's your family. And so it's so very important how your family is doing through this process. Starting churches takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of time. It can be very stressful financially. It can put a lot of strain on your family. And so this issue is extremely important, and I get a lot of questions about this from young church planners. They're saying, hey, one of my number one concerns is this. How do you balance this? How do you work through this? And so how do you manage that tension and stress? How do you make sure that your family is not a casualty of ministry, but not only not a casualty, but they thrive and they grow as well? And so we're all aware of kind of the family train wreck stories that seem so common that they're almost stereotypical in the ministry. So how do we avoid that? There seems to be sometimes this attitude that that's just the way it is, and I don't think that's okay. It doesn't have to be that way. So I want to roll through 9 keys. I'm hoping to get through this quickly for you, but I want to roll through 9 things that I think are extremely important when it comes to this issue of having a strong family as a pastor. The first thing is deal with any relationship issues you have going on in your family before you start church planting or ministry. Taking on a more spiritual job, so to speak, is not going to necessarily make your family better. In fact, sometimes it can just make you more of a hypocrite while your family's a disaster. So deal with those issues. I can assure you that it will not automatically get better because you have put the word pastor in front of your name. Especially as you're in more and more of a fishbowl as a family. And so take the time to deal with whatever you have going on. And, in fact, even if you feel like things are pretty good, before you go into ministry, like take some time to maybe go on a couples retreat. Or something like that to just make things as strong as they can possibly be. And of course, dealing with things as they come up along the way. Make sure you do not let things go on. Find a couple or find a counselor outside of your church that you can connect with and you can trust, that you could take even the small things to work through in your marriage or in your family. And the same goes for issues that you're having with your kids. Just make that your first priority going into ministry. The second thing is this. Get your finances in order before church planting or going into ministry. Finances can put an extraordinary pressure on any relationships, but especially on your family relationships. You do not want to go into church planting with financial issues. And trust me, again, those aren't going to get any better for quite some time when you're going into church planting, especially. I remember one of our campus pastors, a new campus pastor, was just getting one of our campuses off the ground. We literally plant them. We just don't launch campuses. We plant them. And so it's a little different philosophy. And I remember he got in a car accident and they totaled out his car and they gave him a check, and it was a good amount. He was happy. He was like, man, I didn't think my car was worth that, so that's good. So he said, I'm going to give $1,000 of that to the building fund of our new campus. And I told him, I said, man, I don't want to discourage you from being generous. I think it's awesome that you want to be generous, but I just want to make you aware that Satan works through our cars. That's what he does. He works through our cars. And so I would just really encourage you, buy the best car you can possibly buy with the money that they have given you. And so a year and a half into church planting, the reason I told him that is because I experienced that. As we were planning our first church, I had thousands of dollars worth of things go wrong in my life at that point. And it just seems like church planters get tried financially, and you don't want to go in with your finances a mess. If you're working with a church planting organization, more than likely they're going to require you pay off school debts and things like that before you even start, because they understand this principle. The third thing is this: plant your church or do ministry out of the flow of being missional as a family. This is huge. Do ministry out of the flow of being missional as a family. My family never felt like I was out planting a church. They felt like we were planting a church. We were missional as a family before we started church planting. It was who we were. We were on mission with other families as well. And so their friends their families weren't in vocational ministry, but they were right there alongside of us doing the same things. And so we lived life with people who were missional as families. So there was nothing about, well, we're only doing this because we're the pastor's family. We're all doing this. And so if we were having folks over to watch a football game and we invited somebody that we felt like maybe didn't have a relationship with Jesus, for us, that was just part of what we did as a family. That wasn't like I wasn't working during the football game. That was just who we were as a family. When I coach kids on sports teams, the church would sponsor the T-shirts, and I would say, hey, I'm a pastor. If I can ever help you, let me know. There I'm playing the pastor card. I get it. But still, our family saw even playing sports in park and rec leagues as opportunities to be missional as a family. And we would have the end of the season party at church, and we were constantly integrating ministry into the things that we did. And this also helps raise kids to be leaders as well. And so the fourth thing is this: put the work in during the day and quit in the evening. Put the work in during the day and quit in the evening. This schedule might not work for everyone. We'll talk about that here in a second. But for most of the world is working between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. They're out working. And so why would you be home or running errands or that kind of thing and not getting your work done during that time? So put the work in and come home, and when you're home, don't bring the work with you. Now, you're going to get texts from key people. You're going to have a volunteer children's director that's trying to get your children's ministry off the ground while you're church planting. They're going to text you at night because they work during the day, and that's the only time they can work on church stuff, so to speak. And so you need to answer that text. You don't want to leave a volunteer hanging. But there should be a very few people, and we're going to talk about that you answer right away when you're with your family. So, you're going to shoot them a quick text back, or, if it requires more thought, you're going to shoot them a text back and say, hey, I need to look at some things. I'm going to send you an email in the morning with a full response. And so just let them know, hey, I care about you. I care about the work you're putting in right now. That's going to take me a little time to look into. So they know that you're listening, you're there, you're available to them. If your family has a unique schedule, then you may have to change it up. Maybe you can't work in the kind of 8 to 5 range. But I would still say this: clearly define when you need to be working. Set a regular schedule and work hard in those times, and then be truly present with your family when you are not. And you may even have to look at your family at those times and say, look, we agreed. This is when I work, right? This is, I have a real job, and this is when I work. Church planting is not for people who are not self-motivated hard workers. It's just not. But most of us lean more towards the working too hard and so we've got to guard our time with our families. All right, the fifth thing is disciple your family first. And we've kind of been around that a little bit, talking about being missional, but this is specifically like dealing with your family and leading your family spiritually. So you have to be real. They need to see that you live out what you preach. You need to make sure that you're taking time to have a ton of intentional spiritual conversations with your family and with your kids. Be as intentional about leading your family spiritually as you are the church. And I think this is where, like, many of us fail. It feels like that you see it as very important to help other people grow spiritually, but not your family. And if it feels like that, it's not going to work out well. And maybe this is the reason we do that, because we think to ourselves, well, my family goes to my church, right? And so everything I'm doing for my church, my family gets that as well, and that's going to grow them as well. But you need to take that role and spend extra time making sure you're having those spiritual conversations with your family. Here's the sixth thing, and this one's kind of a big one, because this can get really distorted, and this is where some tension sometimes happens on staff. Help your family have a realistic view of ministry. This is tough. This is one that I see that has actually surprised me through the years, because I thought that this would get better. But here's what I've noticed. I've noticed that younger families in the ministry have heard the horror stories of the past, of when people were out 5 nights a week for church and their families were stressed and their kids turned out terrible, and they've heard those stories, and so they come in and they've already kind of made that judgment on current modern day ministry that it'll kill your family, that you got to really be on guard, because if my husband answers a text to his head elder or deacon, at 7 o'clock at night, then here we go. Our family's going to disintegrate. And so I think that it's kind of interesting that thought has been out there. When I first interviewed for a church position. I interviewed with this church in I think it was in Maryland, and it was the craziest interview I've ever heard in my life. Like, this guy said, okay, so we have visitation 2 nights a week. We got Wednesday night church. We got Sunday night church. We got, a men's prayer thing that happens on Thursday, and then, we make sure that you have family time on Friday. I was just like, that's just insane, right? Like, that's where we came from. But now most churches are given a day off a week during the week, so an actual work day off, because Sunday tends to be so much of a work day. And so you're getting that. You're going home in the evenings. There's not visitation. It's more relational evangelism. You don't have a Sunday night service. You don't have a Wednesday night service. So you might have like a meeting that you have to go to every once in a while in an evening, and you need to be in your small group, and the whole church needs to be in a small group. So that's not really a job thing, right? That's just part of it. And so I think that that we're projecting the past onto the current. And so if anything pops up at all, we say, oh, we can't do that, we can't do that, we can't do that. And so I think it's important also to understand busy seasons, right? Like, there are times that you just have a busy season. There's times where you're planning more Christmas events, and that's going to be a little bit busy, right? That's going to happen. That doesn't mean ministry is killing your family, right? There's times where you're going to run a kids camp. That doesn't mean ministry is killing your family. It's so important to understand this, because when you think about it, what job doesn't have those moments right now? I mean, the accountant does not have a good March, right? I mean, he has a good March financially, but stress-wise, he does not have a good March. You have a businessman who has to go on a 4-day business trip, and then when he comes back on a Tuesday, he has to be at work on Wednesday. That's a super busy week for him. That's crazy. The football coach during football season, the engineer during plant shutdown and restart, like, that's going to be a nightmare for him. And so we all see those moments where the nurse during the ER nurse or urgent care nurse during a bad flu season. We all see those moments where in any job there's a busy season. But it seems like if it happens in ministry, we automatically assume, oh, you're killing our family. There's this move afoot to kill my family. So I think you got to have those conversations with your family, and that everybody's just got to be realistic. If you're doing a good job managing your schedule, your church is doing a good job caring about your family and making sure that you get the proper time off and opportunities to connect with your family on a regular basis, those moments should not be a problem. And so I think it's important to understand that. It's also important to understand that we have a real job. I think sometimes, our families and other people in the church see our job as, well, we're super flexible. If I need anything during the week, I could just call the pastor and he'll come over and do it, or that kind of thing. Or your wife, feels like, well, hey, I've got 8 errands that need to be run, and I'll just ask my husband to do it on a Monday afternoon, and instead of working, But then I still want him home at night, right? And so I think it's important to understand you do have a real job. Yes, it's flexible, but at the same time, I think it's important to understand and treat it that it is a real job, and you're going to put the work in. And sometimes families don't see it that way, and they kind of cheat on that a whole lot, and then all of a sudden they're shocked when the church doesn't make it, or they're shocked when the church lets their spouse go. And, all of a sudden it becomes clear that asking him to run all the errands during the day, or keep the kids 2 days a week, or do the homeschooling because the wife went back to work. And so then, it's the husband's job then to pick up the slack because his schedule's more flexible. All of a sudden it's clear that wasn't such a great idea. And so, you got to treat it like a real job. If you had a family where both people were working real jobs, so to speak, you would have to make different arrangements for your kids. You understand what I'm saying? So it's just super important. Like, put the time in, work hard while you're there, and then when you're off, be with your family. The seventh thing is this: watch your heart. Even in a small church, as the leader, you can get a lot of attention, and it's easy to make it all about you, or to get sucked in when other people are making it all about you, and you really need to resist that. Pride is the biggest issue that can happen. It's I don't think a lot of people, just to be honest with you, I don't think a lot of people are well suited to be mega church pastors and handle it well. There are some guys that are killing it, and they're handling it very well. For a lot of people, it's too much pressure, it's too much attention, So we got to be careful about those kind of things. If your family feels like that they exist for your reputation, they will not be on board. You'll lose your family over that. Also, understand the temptations that come with leading a church. Make it a point to never put yourself in a situation where temptation can occur. And don't meet with people of the opposite sex in a private room or one-on-one, and even in public. And make sure that other staff members are around, or if it's around the office, make sure your door is open. You have to really make sure that you are not putting yourself in a situation for temptation. All right, here's the 8th thing. The 8th thing is don't get sucked into the pastor's kid stereotype. This is important. I have seen pastors' kids get away with all kinds of things because they can always turn around and say, you're only worried about how I'm acting because you're the pastor and you don't like how it looks for you. So it's an instant guilt trip on the pastor. Then the pastor begins to feel like, I can't really say anything. They're going to hold that over my head. I feel bad for them. And so first of all, I will just tell you, I never let people tell pastors' kids jokes around my kids. I literally hunted down a preteen leader one time after a retreat and said, hey, I heard that this happened on the bus, that you made a pastor's kid joke, and then other people started making pastor's kid jokes. And I said, my kid doesn't feel like a pastor's kid. They've never felt like that. They just feel like they're one of the kids. And so I don't want that pressure on them. I don't want them thinking about that. I don't want them to begin to use that as an excuse. And they said, man, I never thought about it. But I was like I was very serious about that. And so I also never indicated to my kids that I had any different expectations of them because I was the pastor. What I told them constantly is we do these things because we love Jesus, and this is what people who love Jesus and follow Jesus do. And if you have another standard for your kids that doesn't fall into that sentence, if it's not something that people who follow Jesus do and love Jesus do, then you may actually be imposing pastors' kids' expectations on your kids just because they're the pastor's kids. And so you want to be careful about that. One of the things that we always pushed in our student groups was that we expected all of our students to be leaders. So that helped with my kids because I expected my kids to be leaders, but they didn't think that I was asking them to be a leader because I was a leader. They thought that I was asking them to be a leader because we ask all students to step up and become leaders. Because at our church, we feel like if students are becoming leaders, you don't have to worry about what they're following. And so just, don't allow some weird guilt because of what your kids go through as pastors' kids to change how you challenge them or hold them accountable. Never let it become an issue. All right, one more thing. More time with less people. More time, less people. Who are those few people that you will text back at 7 o'clock at night? Who are the few? Right? From the very beginning of starting your church, you need to make up your mind. You are going to invest in a few key leaders who will invest in a few key leaders who will invest in a few key leaders so that you are not stretching yourself thinner and thinner and thinner as the church grows. And so you can check out our podcast on that. We have a whole podcast on more time with less people and how important that is in the leadership pipeline. And so it is absolutely essential that you take that philosophy from the start, because if you don't, you will begin to get so stretched thin. Either your church will begin to stink or your family will begin to stink because it'll take so much time out of you to keep your church going well. If you don't take this philosophy. I'm telling you, it's absolutely essential you start it from the start. And so if you don't get this concept, you're going to burn yourself out. So I hope that you'll take the time to talk about these points with your family. I think, again, those expectations are really important to understand. How does a regular week of work go? How do we respect the work week and the time and treat it like a real job, but then make sure that we do have flexibility. We do have the opportunity to take the time with our family that we need to have. What do especially busy times look like? And have these conversations with your team as well, because it's great if your whole church and your whole staff can get on the same page on this kind of issue. And so that's all the time we have for this episode. As always, I hope that if you find this content helpful, you'll like, subscribe, comment, and share. And I'll see you next time on the Ignite Movements podcast.